The other guys talked about Richard Sherman. We don't get to. It's what we wanted to do, to talk about the Duke out, but we can't. We've got to stay focused. We've got to give you the entire package here at 710 ESPN Seattle. And so we have. We stuck with Seahawks, and we've stuck with our conversation with John Clayton, which was on Thursday's show, which we podcast, of course, as always. And the NFL news specifically, the player news, the real stuff, was that 35-year-old John Abraham, last seen playing defensive end for the Atlanta Falcons, and on the sideline for much of the game against the Seahawks.
That's where he's last seen.
Yeah, pretty much
taking a knee,
standing on the sideline, or was he taking a knee most of the time on the sidelines? Is in town to interview with the Seahawks. It was first reported by NFL.com, and we've heard his name. We've heard Osi Umenyiора's name in particular. Dwight Freeney. I think want to make it a trio of veteran defensive ends that we've heard about. And actually, in talking with John Clayton today, I thought it was interesting that John was as enthusiastic as he was about John Abraham and his situation here.
Yeah, and I think he might be the cheapest option based on his age, based on his injury history. You know, and not that the Mariners need to go budget shopping here because they do have money under the cap. I'm not as excited about him as John is, and maybe he'll prove to, maybe he's got something to prove because he certainly didn't end the way he wanted to. Again, he tried to play in that game against the Seahawks with the Falcons, and he spent the majority of that game on the sideline. 35 years old, injuries, it's not going to cost you a ton. It feels like a Jason Jones type of move. Very similar, not the same age, but coming in with an injury issue. Same can be said for Freeney, who had the Achilles injury out there in Indianapolis. He was once a dominant defensive player in this league. I don't know if he still is or not. Umenyiora is a guy who's been splitting time out there in New York, so his numbers don't look quite as good as they did, but it's sort of based on the way they run that defense. He, of the three, to me, is the most appealing. Now, what he's going to cost, I have no idea, and maybe Abraham becomes a guy who can be almost as effective, perhaps, if healthy, but a lot cheaper.
That's why I like Abraham of the three, because I still think you want it to be Chris Clemens' job. I mean, you still want him to be the guy, and when not him, then Bruce Irvin. I mean, you want Bruce Irvin then to be the guy. I know Dave Wyman was speculating that this is what Bruce Irvin's doing in this offseason, is preparing to be that guy. And I'm maintaining the Seahawks signed Chris Clemens for a couple of years because they wanted to give Bruce Irvin a couple of years. Well, he's not going to be ready to start the start of the year. Everyone assumes on the physically unable to perform list, and that's a best case scenario likely for Clemens, which would have him out for 6 weeks. So why not get a guy who's got 1 year left? I mean, if you want to look at it that way with Abraham, a guy who actually you could say, look, we just need you to go full out 6 weeks. 7 weeks, 8 weeks. We'll get Clemens back. You won't be playing as much. You don't have to marshal your body and keep your strength up for the whole year. This is what we need you to do. I mean, there's a chance for him to have a really specific role on this team that might make some sense as opposed to, hey, holding up for 16 weeks, being the guy that you were your entire career. That's why I think he may work a little bit in terms of the context of bringing Clemens back as opposed to Clemens then having to fight for his job coming back.
Yeah.
Okay, I convinced Bob.